Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Liesl McGuire. I'm honored to be the moderator today of an exciting group of panelists to talk about climate, renewable energy, carbon capture solutions moving forward for the betterment of the lives of Alaskans and Americans. The Nature Conservancy in Alaska is engaged in a new effort this summer, and this panel is a part of it. The Alaskan Climate Opportunities Assessment is to inform and educate Alaskans on the merits of bipartisan climate solutions. So many Alaskans and Americans are asking for this bipartisanship. TNC has partnered with McKinley Research Group to commission a research report on Alaska's unique opportunities to address climate change and to assess the economic implications of recent, current, and future investments in those policies. It's a very informative report, and we'll have links to it for your reading today and after. During this 90-minute discussion, we'll explore the efforts and perspectives of climate, innovation, policy, and tech leaders from across the state of Alaska, opportunities stemming from their work, and then the initial findings from the Alaska Climate Opportunities Assessment. It's my honor to introduce our panel today, a distinguished group of Alaskans who are moving and shaking and thinking about the future. First, I want to introduce Ben Kelly, who's the CEO and founder of the Launch Company. Before returning to Alaska, Ben worked in rocketry at SpaceX, designing and operating launch sites, and ran the first missions to return a first stage from orbit. So please help me welcome Ben. Next, we're excited to introduce Mayor Clay Coughlin. He's the mayor of the city of Cordova and the CEO of Cordova Electric Cooperative. It's an honor to see you again today, Mayor, and it's been a joy to work with you in the past. Clay currently serves as the mayor of the city of Cordova, as I mentioned, and is the CEO of Cordova Electric Cooperative. He's a registered professional engineer licensed in the state of Alaska, so he brings that training to all of his work. He's worked with stakeholders at Cordova Electric to build an innovative renewable energy and efficiency program that has propelled the city of Cordova beyond 70% renewable energy generation, 100% community LED street lighting, and 100% underground power line. It's a culture of energy conservation and efficiency. So help me welcome Mayor Coughlin. And next we have Garrett Everidge, who's the managing director of the Alaska Ocean Cluster. Garrett leads research initiatives examining the existing value of Alaska's ocean economy while describing opportunities it offers. He's originally from Kodiak. He commercially harvested salmon, Pacific cod, halibut, shrimp, and king crab from southeast to the Bering Sea. How exciting. After studying economics at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, Garrett served as a research consulting economist at McKinley Research Group, formerly McDowell Group, for 7 years before joining the Alaska Ocean Cluster. So help me welcome Garrett, please. And then next we have Isaac Vandenberg, who is the CEO of Launch Alaska. Isaac has been the fund manager for Launch Alaska Fund 2, which is a $3 million fund that invests directly in the accelerator's cohort companies. Isaac has worked with hundreds of early stage companies and entrepreneurs responding to Alaska's food, water, transportation, and energy challenges. He is also sitting on the board of Commonwealth North and leads the Energy and Efficiency Subcommittee and the Carbon Pricing Subcommittee of Alaska's Climate Action Leadership Group. So thank you, and please help me welcome Isaac. A lot of public service going on there. And then finally, our last panelist, but not least, is Brian Holst, who is the executive director of the Juneau Economic Development Council. Since the year 2008, Brian has served as the council's executive director. Before joining JEDC, Brian worked in community and economic development internationally for more than 20 years. Brian is a graduate of Juneau Douglas High School and the University of Notre Dame. He's also served our country in the U.S. Peace Corps in small business development, and has also worked as an international consultant and business owner. So please help me welcome him. I'm first going to go to Ben. And I want to start by allowing each person, as we go through the panel, to add in individual stories and remarks so that we're having a conversation today. I have some questions that I want to serve as conversation starters, but more than anything, the Alaskans out there watching this, I think, just want to hear a conversation. To begin with, the fact that we're having the conversation is amazing. And I think a lot of people that I've had conversations with have said, back to my time serving in the Senate, Lisa, where are we on the state's energy policy? We set these lofty goals, we made commitments, and where are we? So I want to start by asking each panelist, and I'll start with Ben, where do you think Alaska sits in its energy policy, and how are those policies translating into real life, into the conversations you're having and the thoughts that you're having? So I want to start with the Alaska part and then move into the exciting national news that we just received. So Ben?
Hey, thank you. Appreciate the introduction, the opportunity to be here today. So we have a lot of conversations around Alaska energy and where we sit in the energy policy debate. I think just about everybody else on this panel is working more directly in energy than we are. Obviously, I'm working in aerospace and doing a lot of Earth monitoring for climate and other personal activities outside of work. But a huge challenge for us is actually manufacturing and cost of manufacturing due to energy cost. And so energy, beyond just being good citizens of this state and of the northern part of the world and wanting clean energy, it also impacts our business as we're trying to build aerospace hardware economically and move that around. In speaking with representatives, I've heard everything from extreme optimism to outright apathy. And I do believe the truth lies somewhere in the middle. And a startup I'm helping advise is working on nuclear microreactors. I'm sure Isaac will touch on that a little bit more. And so I see a lot of innovative things happening around the state. But I would say in general, our policy could probably be changed to be a little more aggressive towards adapting these renewables and these other diverse modes of energy generation in a way that provides us with backbone power as well as clean overages. So that would be my initial thought on
that's excellent. And can I just follow up on that, Ben, as you complete your remarks here? What do you think would be an incentive? What would be a policy if it were coming from the state, if it were coming from the federal government, if it were coming from a local community? Where is that role that you think the government could or should play in incentivizing and encouraging the kind of manufacturing that you're discussing?
Well, specifically for manufacturing, there's a lot of incentive in helping get things set up. I think there's logistical challenges in getting equipment set up in Alaska, up and running, and then also in finding economical ways to get what we produce back out. And so policy-wise, I think working to help us adapt renewables so that cost of production goes down, but also working to provide grants or low interest loans to set up that manufacturing capability in general. For instance, a lot of work that we're investigating in the near future is just-in-time manufacturing for metallic 3D printing. This has got a huge place in aerospace, but I think we see beyond aerospace as a technology we could kind of adapt across Alaska and be really useful. But these are large machines, they're high energy requirement. And so being able to find ways to kind of kickstart that, prime the pump a little bit and get those sorts of things rolling, I think would go a long way. I think Mayor Copeland has seen a lot of success in projects that have had revenue sharing as well as, some of the initial investment burden sharing. And I think it's a great model for other things that could come, and we should continue to build off that success.
Thank you, Ben. And with that, Mayor Copeland, I'll ask you the same question. You've been knee deep in this since when I was serving. And so my question remains, how do you feel Alaska's energy policy is working or not working? And if you have a focal point, a story to share about where you think it's working, or a focal point, as Ben just shared, of an area where he thinks there needs to be renewed focus and improvement.
Thank you, Liesl. If all policymakers had the vision and enthusiasm that you did, we'd be in a great place. But I'd like to kind of back up a little bit and say, what's the role of policy? Because I see both sides as a mayor, as a city councilman, serving on the Federal Advisory Committee for Department of Energy and the policy side, and then as a utility manager with boots on the ground and kind of the ground view and the operational side. Policy, I think we need to rethink what policy's role is, because policy's always struggled to move at the speed of business, but now we have kind of a sea change where business struggles to move at the speed of technology. So when we have technology trying to guide, we have policy trying to guide and shape technology that we haven't even fully developed the use cases and applications for, it starts to look like policy often gets in the way. And I'll give you an example. We spent about $225,000 completely retrofitting Cordova Electric, or the community of Cordova, to LED street lighting. That saves our city $35,000 a year. It saves us thousands of gallons of diesel fuel. It fits our energy resources, which are largely diesel dependent in the winter when our run-of-the-river hydros aren't available. So that was a great investment and a great return on investment, and a great step towards our strategic goal of getting off of diesel altogether. But the policy side is that we had to spend almost $300,000 in a air quality permitting process that didn't save one drop of diesel fuel. It consumed tremendous staff resources that we would have rather spent solving the problem rather than complying with the regulations. So I'd like to back up to where policy really is. And I think we're at a place that in certain sectors and certain parts, especially emerging technologies like battery energy storage or energy storage in general, the new electronics, data analytics, big data, all these new tools that we have, and kind of have some exemptions and some policy relief and kind of more of a follow or get out of the way approach. When we see other sectors like transportation, where Uber has a largely unregulated environment to revolutionize the whole industry, and then the policies catch up later to solve the problems. I think we need to look at models like that more and try to, in our kind of highly regulated monopolistic environments, try to get out of the way a little bit and maybe allow some exceptions and allow the utilities and organizations and manufacturers to mature these technologies and get better value and understanding out of them first.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Clay. That's, well stated. And my hope is that, we can create a summary of the conversation today and put some of those recommendations in writing and kickstart the policymakers into thinking through some of these. But that's a beautiful example of Uber and just the general, resistance that there has been to renewable energy. And we know the reasons, but with this report that was just commissioned by the McKinley Research Group in partnership with the Nature Conservancy, look, we're showing that Alaska is warming at 2 to 3 times the global average. Climate change will cost the state hundreds of millions of dollars annually moving forward. And that's passed on to every man, woman, and child and future generations in particular who will bear that burden. And that the state's extensive energy needs are further underscored by more and more research. And we don't have enough, but this is more coming at it. That our renewable energy projects need more capital investment. And that's one of the things that we've tried to do in policies throughout, but it's estimated that there are $690 million that have been invested from 2010 to 2020. We need 3-4 times that, right? So thank you, Clay. So Garrett, I'm going to go to you. How exciting what you're doing with the Alaska Ocean Cluster. So that same question for you in sort of looking at the state, and state and local policies, will say the things that guide you in the work you're doing. Where do you see things that are working, and where do you see things for improvement? Recommendations.
Thank you. Well, so in terms of where things are working, let's remind ourselves that when we're talking about Alaska fisheries, we do have some of the best managed fisheries on the planet. I don't think that's hyperbole. We were able to learn a lot of lessons from some of the fisheries on the East Coast of the United States. And we were able to bring some of those regulatory practices into Alaska. And over the past 60 years since statehood, we have been regulating our fisheries, regulating them in a way to balance benefit across a variety of stakeholders, to try to benefit the tension between pure economic efficiency and benefiting a variety of participants. Today, we're moving into what I would describe as a kind of a new era, right? We have this expectation of stability. We've been looking to the past to kind of have an understanding of what the future holds, but we're moving into a new era. So I would say we have some success stories that we have observed. You can look at different pieces of legislation from the AFA. Rationalization is controversial, but there are positive elements where we have allocated private property rights to boost the quality of our resource in terms of seafood that's being delivered, to increase safety at sea. So there are these different examples. In terms of what we could do better, I would say just culturally, we should have maybe more of an expectation that change is going to happen, right? As we look to the future, we're already seeing changes in our Pacific cod stocks, our pollock stocks. Just last week, I was on a call with a Pacific cod fisherman who's fishing so far north. He's fishing in an area he's never been before, right? Bristol Bay is just coming off another record year, potentially due to climate change, while other salmon fisheries are struggling. So as we look to the future, perhaps one of the easiest things we can do is just maybe recognize that we're in for more change than expected, right? And so with all of the mindset around, the communities, just preparing our communities for that change, right? I would also just say, another willingness to just be experimental. I think about, planting 1,000 seeds and seeing what flowers. I mean, one of the small things we can do on the margin is to use the data that we're gathering in fisheries in a more transparent and robust way. We collect a huge amount of data from our fisheries, but right now it's kind of all siloed. It's not very connected. There's a big opportunity I see for just using that data to help us make better business decisions. If you're a fisherman, to help us support higher quality seafood, to help move seafood out of the state in better ways. Those are a few of my quick thoughts.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to shift now to Isaac and Brian. And if you want to add general comments in on that question about improvements in state policy as a whole, please feel free to do that. But I want to highlight a specific thing that came out of the McKinley report. It's interesting because, when you read it, you can see that the job growth that we anticipated is there. 30 million in annual labor income now coming to the state of Alaska, 350 annual jobs supported via renewable energy development and construction over the last decade. That's awesome. But one of the things that the report notes is that Alaska currently lacks a wind energy technician program. Now that's just one example, but as you answer the question, I'd like to ask you how you feel the state or private sector or together could play a role in meeting the demand for this growing field in addition to other tech development. So the question is about the very specific point of wind energy technician training as one example, okay? So I want to ask you the question, but you may then, Isaac and Brian, cite other things where you see a lack of training support, either by the private sector or by the state. So I'll turn it to you, Isaac.
Great, thanks, Liesl, and again, thanks for your leadership and your background in this area. And I agree with the previous panelists. If we could just have the same kind of passion and stick-to-itiveness that you've had. We'd be in a much better place as a state. So if I could just take the question you asked previously real quick about policy, there's a great resource out there called Desire or Desiree. I've heard it pronounced both ways, that the North Carolina Clean Energy Technology Center does, where they track state policies, incentives, and programs by state. And that's a good way to just, in a real brief way, understand, how we're doing compared to other states. And I checked it recently. I think Alaska right now, the long and short is that Alaska is very behind in terms of our policy environment. If we're serious about trying to encourage this renewable, clean tech, climate tech sector, we are lagging seriously behind. I think Alaska currently has 14 incentive programs. If you take another much smaller red state like Texas, I think they have 112 rebates and incentive programs, almost 100 more than we have. And you can see what that has done. There's of course other factors there, but we just do not have the policy support so far that we would need if we're serious about this sector. I think the stuff that Chris Rose is doing over at REAP is fantastic. So if you want to know what some of the policies that we need, get involved with REAP and some of their policy meetings. The one that I'm particularly passionate about right now is which is kind of, I think, next in line, is a renewable portfolio standard for the state. And this is a policy that many other states have. I think most states in the US now have a renewable portfolio standard. And all that does is it forces the electric utilities in the state to plan for their a large portion of their generation to come from renewables. Right now, if you're a utility in Alaska, there's really no stick to force you to start building out renewable generation. And as a result, our utilities, even though you can bring them a very economic, exciting project that has investors lined up and has a great solar developer, a storage developer, the utility can basically just punt, as long as they want to, and they can delay, and there's no real reason for them to move forward. If we really want to get moving quickly, we need some kind of a policy that forces utilities to start thinking about how they're going to, source the majority of their generation from renewables. So an RPS is critical, pretty basic. A lot of other states are doing it. It's not rocket science. And then that will lead to, a renewable energy credit market for the state. I would also just say that some very specific things that the state can do, treat solar and storage and renewable developers as utilities for tax purposes, allow for property tax exemptions for renewable developers and storage developers in the state. Look at providing low interest debts for those same developers. So I think there's a ton of money wanting to be spent on good projects. If the state had some kind of 2% or 2.5% low interest debt on projects, all of a sudden you'd see many more projects get into the money that are not in the money right now. Having that money available, also having lenders understand how to do business with startups would be great. And Ben can get on the soapbox about this, but approach our local banks as a tech startup and try to get debt from them and see how that conversation goes. It's not great. As a result, our best tech companies are going to leave the state to get debt from banks outside the state. So those are just on the kind of tax perspective, and then to the question that you were asking there, or on the policy perspective, sorry, and then the question that you were getting at there, Liesl, with how can the state team up with our organizations or with climate tech companies. A good example, we have a company right now that is a vertical takeoff landing company that has been developing their technology for a decade. They see Alaska as their target market, and they are developing a hybrid electric amphibious plane that they're calling the Alaska Bushcraft. And they are looking for space in Alaska, right? Because they want to assemble their kits here And eventually they'd love to, once they get FAA certification, actually do like, full scale manufacturing in the state. And so they're saying, what do you all have available for us? We would love to come there and we would love to set up our operations. And we've already designed this plane and we're talking to Alaska stakeholders, but what can you do? And so, AvTech is a great group that has the ability to customize training programs, because that's one of the things this company needs is some workforce development through high schools and colleges. So AvTech is willing to do a program to customize these folks that can assemble these aircraft. Are there other things that the governor's office of the state of Alaska can offer? Is there some kind of land that the municipality could provide? Are there buildings on municipal property that a company like this could have access to? What kind of things can we as Alaskans do when there's a company like this? Not to kind of give away the farm, but to at least show that we want these companies here. A lot of this isn't even financial stuff. It's just organizations organizing to say, hey, company with a really exciting trajectory, we want you here and we're willing to get together to support you being in the state. And so I've taken up my time here, but I do think that there's some kind of low hanging fruit that just by having conversations like this or getting some of the organizations to the table where we can improve the kind of business climate for companies that would want to land and grow in the state.
That's brilliant, Isaac. Thank you. It strikes me that maybe one recommendation would be, to approach the commissioner of the Department of Community and Economic Development with banking that comes under it on the 2 points. The first would be knowing that other countries and states compete for innovative startup and mid-level growth companies. And they do this, they pull together, and it usually takes a visionary leader, whether it's the governor or a particular member of the House or the Senate or a mayor. But in this case, what could be done to assemble a working group to look at a one-stop shop within that department where you get a recommendation or a lead like you have regarding Alaska bushcraft, and you say, go talk to these guys. They have the power to look at all of the suite of tools that could be assembled to help incentivize you coming to Alaska. So that's just one idea there. And then on the banking, this issue has come up, and when we worked on it in our office and created the SETS fund and then the Arctic Infrastructure Fund, we had to bump up against banks and the conventional lending rates. And that was the idea, was to get closer to what you're saying, 2%, 2.5%. So I wonder also, looking at chartering of banking and the state charter, there are banks that have taken hold in places like Oregon, which are very innovative. So Orange Bank and a couple of the others, that might be something that you guys all follow up on, because I think so long as we're in that stranglehold, it's going to be difficult to attract and retain. Okay, I'm going to go to Brian next with the same question, and then typical Liesl, I jumped right into the conversation, and my deepest apologies. It's so exciting, and I have so many questions, and we only have 90 minutes. And thank you to all of those who are out there watching and listening, or listening to it at a later point. So after Brian answers this question, I'm going to come back around the circle, beginning with Ben, for your 5 to 7 minutes of remarks. Whatever you want to say about your company, about yourself, about the future, please get ready to do that. So Brian, the question to you, again, the McKinley report noted that Alaska currently lacks a wind energy technician training program. Just as one example, how could the state or private sector play a role in meeting the demand for this growing field, in addition to other tech development?
And thank you. And I'll keep it brief so that give everyone a chance to go back to their comments. I think this is a perennial challenge in all of our industries. We don't have enough nurses in Alaska. I think the answer is in each time is a focus.
I'm on the phone.
Isaac, you've did a great job of flagging AvTech as an important resource and a great example of a group that's been supporting the industry. And I think we really need to continue to look to the University of Alaska system as a resource. And just in this broader, I just mentioned a resource that we have found incredibly valuable is the Alaska Center for Climate Assessment and Policy, led by Sarah Trainer and John Walsh at the University of Alaska. And when literally in their name is policy, and they are an incredible resource for all of us as we consider these topics, and they're very responsive. So I think, Lisa, that's my short answer, is that I think we need to identify what we want to do and what goal we want to perceive. I imagine there are not enough wind technicians because nobody's clear that that's been a priority, and they didn't put that in their goals as an individual worker. Hey, I want to work in that field, because that field barely exists. So that's part of our challenge, is clear goals set out so people then can find their path and the way they can participate in achieving those goals.
Thank you, Brian. And just real quickly on the main first question I asked, in your leadership there in Juneau, is there anything that you see that has been working that you want to highlight? And then to your broader point, we need to have more clear articulated goals, but is there any other area that you've observed, whether it's in hydro or other areas, that you think really needs attention by state and local leaders?
I don't think the state does enough to direct. We have seen at the local level, for example, we saw an interest in an opportunity for using more hydroelectricity for our vehicles. Juneau has the highest per capita rate of electric vehicles in America, but it didn't just occur. It was an investment that was made to build out public infrastructure. So local government partnering with local organizations decided this is important for us, put in some infrastructure, and people responded. But policy-wise, we see too few opportunities. We see, and I hope that we can talk about this at some point later on. We see our, Sea Alaska and other corporations participating in carbon markets. And
yes,
incredible impact to them, changing behavior, all led by government in California, right? That has the requirement and vision that they want to push renewable energy, and we benefit from that. But where are the policy decisions here in Alaska that would drive Alaskans with more benefit for Alaska? Those California policies, fortunately, California, there's the option you could pay into California, the state of California, or you could buy carbon offsets elsewhere. Fortunately for us, those California companies are choosing to buy some offsets in Alaska. But many of those, those opportunities for us are few and far between. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement on the policy front.
What a great point, to look to the California model and how another tool that companies could avail themselves of. Excellent point. Thank you so much for that, Brian. I wanted to remind people that by clicking on the CC button, you can engage closed captioning, so that people know that. Okay, so now we're going to go back to Ben and just make our way through for opening remarks in general, 5 to 7 minutes. It's so exciting. Thank you for the opportunity to be with all of you today.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, well, I'm glad it worked out this way, because now I get to piggyback on Brian's comments about carbon markets, which is pretty much what my entire 5 to 7 minutes revolved around anyway. So it's perfect.
Awesome.
Looks like it was all planned. So a question that had come up in the Q&A that I'll just touch briefly on is, when building startups, what attracted people, or what attracted me to come back to Alaska and build startups? And something that I always think about is, beyond just having a deep love for this state, the peoples of this state, and seeing a lot of opportunity here, it's that this is a place where individual people can come together and make an impact. We've got people that are working all over the state. We have access to our delegation in Washington. We have access to the legislature in Juneau at a level that I haven't seen in other startup markets that I've worked in, specifically like LA and San Francisco. You don't see the same level of integration and participation. I think that's really unique here, and I think it's a great opportunity. I think there's also a huge amount of opportunity in Alaska when we look at what we have as far as renewable resources, and that is everything from fisheries, all the way through the renewable energy assets that we have. I don't see any place else with as much potential upside and a chance to do it in a way that doesn't exploit that resource, but instead protects it and grows it sustainably and thinks about the people in the communities that are involved in the taking of that thing to market. I think, something that has my interest as I look at opportunities beyond what I'm doing with Launch Company. A huge interest for me is carbon capture. As everybody said, the Arctic is warming a lot faster than the rest of the world. For people who might be skeptical about carbon markets, Tesla in the first quarter of this year made 518 million just in regulatory credits. That's 3 months. And that's by selling credits to their competitors who aren't building cars that are they're not battery electric cars. So that's a huge opportunity, and that's something that people are just starting to scratch the surface of, as Brian mentioned. We have about 200 million acres of wild land. 129 million acres of that is forest. California is about 100 million acres. So we've got about 2 Californias worth of wild land that can be protected, used as carbon sink, and preserved in a way. I'm not talking about building it out in a way that destroys it, but rather using its natural ability to sink carbon as a way to create value for the state. So when I'm thinking about businesses that work well in Alaska, I'm thinking about businesses that either use our geography to an advantage or remove our geography from the equation, right? And so I probably wouldn't start a business here where I had to, have just-in-time delivery to the state of Ohio. That would be very, very expensive and very, very stressful, right? But what's exciting about things like carbon capture is that it's actually both of those criteria in one business. It uses our unique geography, our more coastline than the rest of the U.S. combined, over 46,000 miles, all of that wild land. As carbon sinks, and it's something that we can preserve and enjoy and preserve for the peoples who are indigenous here and make responsible use of the land. And it also removes our geography from the equation by being a financial instrument where we don't actually have to deliver a product. We're instead delivering a credit, and that's something that is geography agnostic and doesn't matter. So I think that's an area that is really, really primed for a lot of growth and opportunity here. And I think for me, it's very exciting because it's making a real impact. It can be a roadmap for other Arctic nations on how to also participate in protecting the globe, and it can help keep Alaska wild and green instead of necessarily having to change our land and use up more resources in a non-sustainable way. So those are really the heart of what I wanted to share there, and a project that I'll definitely be working on more in the future, but don't have a lot of time with now, working on LaunchCo full time. But yeah, I think couple that with what I said before, I think I'd be happy to yield the rest of my time to the rest of the group and open it up to further conversation. So thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ben. Brilliant as usual, and so grateful that you returned home with your family and started this beautiful business, and that you remain so connected in all of these groups. I loved your point about how the carbon credits sort of tick all the boxes, inside geography and outside geography. And I think one of the main things that we try to think about, even in looking at indigenous culture, is how do we leave our land? How do we leave this precious Alaska better than we found it? And so we're moving forward in trying to shift the way that we use energy, but also to offset whether it's carbon capture and storage, carbon credits, but to sort of undo as best we can the damage that has been done before. So thank you so much. Okay, next I'm going to go to Clay.
Well, thank you. And actually, I really appreciate starting with a few questions and some points rising to the surface, because it helps me actually shape my opening statement. And I'm a bit of an organizational rebel. So as I hear a lot of the comments and ideas, my first inclination is to debate and push on things, but I think that's important. We're in a very resource limited time in Alaska, and we need to be a lot more strategic, in my opinion, about what we do and what we don't do. Because every dollar spent in the wrong direction takes us $2 from the right direction. And we have the talent and the solutions here in the state to solve our problems. And we need to be looking inward, I think, a lot more than outward. So I'm going to go back to policy. And what I didn't say is what I thought should be a policy statement for Alaska. Because, and why I started with what a policy statement should be is because that's where the ship should be sailed. That should set the direction, the course. All these, lending solutions and carbon capture, those are all tactical moves. At a policy level, if I could wave a magic wand, a state policy would be something like, where did I write it down here? Alaska should be a global leader in energy technology because we kind of already are. And we need to lead the globe in clean, affordable energy that delivers maximum social value to the planet and its inhabitants. And so that's something that we need a policy statement that everybody can get behind. D and R, young and old, millennial and traditional. And there's way too much bipolarism and conflicting and fighting over how we get to the goal that I think most of us share. So we are leaders in so many spaces, and we need to recognize that and share that. So I'm going to tell you, Cordova gets a lot of focus on our energy innovation. I'll tell you, as my first several years as a CEO, my lowest marks on my performance evaluations every year were in financial management, because my board didn't understand, thank goodness, it probably would have scared the death out of them, what I was doing and how. But I took us from 37% equity to 57% equity in 7 years. In that time, we paid off $700,000 of short-term debt. We built a $2 million cash reserve. We reduced our electric rates, and that's world-class performance, world-class. Our bank is a $100 billion plus investor. They said that what we did was genius. I had our blended rate at below 2%. Getting good financing for what we do is not a problem for us. So maybe we need to share that because it was innovative. It did something no one had ever done before because we had an ecosystem that we never had before. Our monetary and fiscal policy in this country was no longer driven by market forces. It was driven by policy. So stop and think about that for a minute. That means that the government decides what our interest rates are going to be. When I look at the market forces and the hundreds of billions of dollars of cash sitting on the sidelines, I don't see pressure on borrowing. So I took the risk and went to 100% variable rate portfolio, and I had our effective interest rate below 1.5% several years. If someone's talking in the background, please. Thank you. This is important stuff. So we came up with an innovative solution that we need to share with each other. So these conversations in these forums are important because if we put a whole bunch of policy effort into financing that we don't need, that's resources that we aren't spending on solving the problems.
Yeah.
So so why I say this in a policy statement is we need the policy to point the direction and then get out of the way with the policies. The policies sometimes are bigger barriers than they are solutions. One of the key advantages we have that no other state except Hawaii has is a low regulatory environment. Our customers in Cordova own everything from their toaster to their hydroelectric plant. There's one owner in that entire ecosystem, and we're not regulated even by rates. We can and are doing things in Cordova that almost nobody else in this country can do. That's one of the reasons we're able to attract the Department of Energy here. I don't want to change that with things that California are doing. I have an operator of the Bonneville Power Association that provides power to the whole Western US staying at my house tonight. And California is on the verge of outages right now at this minute because of some of those policies. So be careful what you buy into. We've got a lot of talent in this state, and I'm really passionate about this, and I'm worried about where our state's headed. And I know that we have the talent and the solutions to do this. So I'll take one comment about we don't have enough nurses in Alaska. Here's the numbers. We spent the equivalent of 18% of this United States gross domestic product on healthcare in 2018. We spent the equivalent of 7% on energy. So we're spending 3 times as much on healthcare as we are on energy. So is solving the energy problems the solution? Are we really short on nurses, or do we have too many medical needs in this state? How can we improve medical needs? So thinking holistically and saying, what can we do with our energy? What can we do with our food? What can we do with our activities and our mental health and our domestic situations and our culture that helps reduce the medical need? Maybe we need to focus more on that than having more nurses. So again, we need to really have some good conversations about what the true challenges and opportunities are. I did want to talk to thinking holistically, because it was mentioned earlier by both Garrett and by, sorry, I'm taking some notes here as we go, and Ben. Thinking holistically is very important, because if you can create several value streams with one investment, that means you can share the cost and share the benefits. So we can't afford to build a hydroelectric project in Cordova, but we can afford to build a hydroelectric project that's a storage project that will get us off of diesel 100%, that also triples our community water supply and allows us to do winter seafood processing at the scale that we do summer seafood processing. That would catapult us into the top 5 seafood ports in the United States. We're already at 11. And that would provide recreational opportunities. It would provide educational opportunities for workforce development. That's a whole nother, I could talk for hours on some of these things. But in Iceland, they built the Pearl restaurant on top of municipal water tanks. So if we have a first story water supply, that, by the way, we're a tsunami proof community. I didn't worry a lot about the tsunami last night, and I want to share something that happened last night during the tsunami that's very innovative and shows why and how we lead in this state. But the second story is a hydro plant. The third story, why not have a micro pub or a brew pub there? Brew pub.
Yeah.
We've got waste heat. We've got potable water. We've got an unmanned site that has a parking lot and a hydro site that has the world-class view in front of it. Why not put a little brew pub on the third story as a private partnership and steal from Iceland's ideas? So we have so many opportunities, so much talent, so much money in this state. Let's not squander it. You know, I'm an engineer that came back to Alaska. I specifically chose electric industry because I wanted to live anywhere in Alaska that I chose to when I grew up. Not sure I'm there yet. And but I had a program that paid that if I came back to Alaska and used my engineering degree here, I got half of my student loan forgiven.
Yes.
That kind of mattered to me then, but if you look at student loan debts now, it really matters. So I say to the state, if you have a policy that says we want to be a world-class energy, do you think it makes sense to invest in computer programmers and engineers and stuff? Why don't we have that student loan program in place anymore?
Yes.
So if you have a good policy, then you start looking at the tactical decisions and say, does this sail the ship towards where we're going, or does it sail us farther away? And that's my opening comment.
Oh my gosh, Mayor Copeland, I'm on your bandwagon, whatever office you continue to run for and rise up for. We don't want to get political on this call, but I could just say there are openings coming up. You'd be an awesome candidate for. I always love listening to you. You grow more inspiring, actually, with every year of life that you live. And thank you for every suggestion that you made. I think the idea of scalability, collaboration, when you think about waste heat transfer and all of that, I hope that today's conversation, all of you know each other, but I hope it sparks a thought about doing more of these more often without them being recorded, and just a chance to get in a room and bounce ideas off one another and think about that collaboration that could happen. I think you're right, Clay, that if you don't have leaders with a charted and chartable mission, they might as well stay out of the way. That's going to be your best bet. Just stay out of my way. Let us do our thing. And I'm just not sure there's enough of that vision anymore. So I think it's going to end up coming from the folks like yourself who are leading on the local level and other business leaders that are on the phone here today. So I encourage all of you to stay in touch and keep collaborating. Okay, next, Garrett. Without further ado, we're excited to hear from you.
Thanks, Liesl, and thanks others. Well, here's a specific maybe policy statement. I appreciate Clay's instinct on that. Here's this that we can consider. Alaska should lead the globe in development of ocean technology and sustainable fishing. So I think a lot about what our fisheries, what our ocean economy is going to look like in 2050, right? This is 30 years away. For some context, it's our state's largest renewable industry. Ben already mentioned this. Some numbers, it's a sector that produces about $10 billion of value every year. It supports about 100,000 national jobs, including about 60 or 70 in the state of Alaska. It includes about 7,000 vessels, nearly all of which use hydrocarbons. It supports about 100 large shoreside plants. And I mean, Cordova is a great example of a community that with a residents reliant on the sector. So I'm very interested in the challenges that this sector is going to face, how it ripples throughout our economy, and what we can do to position ourselves to define the future. So, as we know, climate change is one of those key factors that are going to impact the sector in both positive and in negative ways. So some of the research tells us that the impacts will be somewhat discontinuous. Some species will be harmed. Some species could actually expand. Some research is pointing to actually a net increase in marine productivity in northern latitudes. Pollock and crab are actually, it looks like they're positioned unfavorably. Salmon is kind of mixed. I already mentioned how there could be a connection with strong Bristol Bay runs, while other salmon runs are struggling. In terms of what we're actually seeing, I mentioned some specific impacts. Arrowtooth flounder, it's a relatively undesirable species, but it's expanded 8-fold in its abundance. So we're seeing we're seeing shifts already right now for our fisheries. Communities are already being impacted. The research indicates that more change is expected. But what's kind of interesting, as I kind of alluded to, is that we have set up our fisheries in a way that expects some modest bounded changes. So we've allocated fishing rights to specific communities, specific fishermen, companies. These rights often have restrictions on how seafood can be harvested, what gear types are used, where they can be delivered. So there's this tension, right, between a somewhat expectation of stability, but we're also learning that we should expect more change. So what does this all mean for us? I see a variety of paths. Some are better than others. The path that I currently think we're on, which I'm not supportive, is one where we're just surprised, right, at every one of these crises. And we're moving from crises to crises. In 2018 and 2019, we were surprised when we saw Pacific cod stocks decline significantly, leading to an 80% decline in harvest and then an eventual closure. And so this is a situation where tens of millions of dollars of income that was expected was not realized. This change rippled through our communities, reducing business income, tax revenue, et cetera. And that's kind of where we're at, right? Where we're surprised at these changes. We're in a reactive stance. Another path that I can see us going down, and the path that I'm trying to work on, is one where we're actually defining our future. We're looking clearly at what are the opportunities, what are the challenges. This is where we're actively innovating, leveraging research, the best practices from all over the globe, right? Clay mentioned what Iceland's doing. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are a lot of things that have been pioneered, a lot of hard lessons learned in other countries and other sectors that can be applied to our state, not only in fisheries, but throughout a variety of sectors. As we think about just ways to be resilient against climate change, one of the best ways to do it is just to be more profitable, right? Use less energy, spend less time at sea looking for seafood, have better information that we can prosecute our fisheries, where we can have expectations about the future. So we clearly need creativity to navigate climate change. And we believe startups at the Alaska Ocean Cluster, we believe startups are one of the best ways society has to increase creativity. So that's why we're working with a variety of startups, currently working with 5, to deliver solutions to the challenges we've identified in the Alaska ocean economy. And our process is something like, looking across our industry, identifying specific areas of improvement or challenges, and then taking a look at the startups that are out there and not limiting our perspective just to Alaska. We love to support Alaskans. We are working with several Alaska companies, but if there's a UK-based firm that has a solution, we want to work with them, and we are. So like others, I'm convinced of the opportunity before us. I look forward to the conversation today, and I'm excited about working on the future.
Thank you, Isaac. How exciting. I love what you said about startups as that best way to inspire and nurture creativity and creative ideas as you move forward. I would love to hear some of the innovations that come about. Of course, energy reduction and thinking about the fuel of diesel being so used, how that can be improved. And then just one little thing I want to put a bug in your ear about is the technology used to fish, and how it's a struggle we faced for years. And I used to ask the question over and over, where are we today on bycatch? And how can we lead the world potentially in some innovations around that? So anyway, we'll talk later. Thank you so much, Isaac. I really appreciate it. So sorry, Garrett, geez, I'm coming next to Isaac. Thank you, Garrett. Okay, so Isaac, you're next, and then Brian.
I wish I was as smart as Garrett, so thanks for that compliment there.
Right?
Yeah, so giving a little overview of Launch Alaska here, and what we're excited about on the horizon. I think stepping back a second, our organization has been around for a few years now, and pretty early on, we started recognizing that the problem that we're trying to solve at Launch Alaska isn't so much one of finding and developing new companies and new startups and new technologies. That startups and technologies and the stuff that we need to get moving quickly is out there and ready to go. The real problem that we're trying to solve at Launch is a lack of velocity of projects in Alaska. So in other words, the solutions that our asset owners in the state, like the port or the airport or utilities, both electric and water utilities and municipalities, the solutions that they need to get moving really quickly on climate, mitigating climate, and on decarbonizing, electrifying the operations, most of those solutions, or at least the solutions that we need for the next 10 years, are already out there. The problem is that there have been an endless number of audits and studies and thought papers and white papers done on what we need, but very few of those ideas have been converted into projects. And so startups, whether they're come locally, although the vast majority of startups that we get applications from come from outside the state, whether they come from here outside the state, they arrive in Alaska and they get excited because we say we have a high cost of energy and we say that we have all these challenges to solve, but then they say, okay, who's actually building stuff? And it's pretty quiet. There's not a lot of projects that are being built. And so our organization has started tackling that problem in the last couple of years, and trying to unstick projects that are stuck in the state. People know they want to get moving. They see the writing on the wall with climate change. They understand the economic imperative and the frankly ethical imperative to get moving quickly, but they just need to kind of get unstuck. And so a lot of what we're doing at Launch right now is that it's getting projects moving forward. And so we have, as an organization, we have a goal to facilitate $1 billion of projects in Alaska by 2030. I know it sounds crazy, but given some of the asset owners and the dollars that are wanting to be spent in Alaska, that kind of a goal actually I think is very achievable. And what we do is we basically run an 8-month program where we recruit startups from anywhere in the world and partner them with Alaska asset owners, some of the folks I mentioned previously. And we try to find paths forward. We try to find ways for projects to get done. And then companies that go through that 8-month Shark Tank program get accepted into our portfolio. So to give you a feeling order of magnitude, we have 31 companies in our portfolio already. We just are adding another 18 companies to our new cohort.
Wow.
that starts here in September 14th. Out of that 18, some fraction of them will get added to our portfolio, probably 4 or 5 if you look at what we've done in the past. But these are companies that are exciting, have plans to grow, are looking to hire, have a reason to be in Alaska, have been vetted by Alaskans including utilities and researchers and national lab folks and investors. So they're companies that are here for a reason and are trying to develop projects and see Alaska is kind of critical to their growth plans. And so, you know, what we're doing as an organization is then when those companies go through that 8-month Shark Tank or that, you know, that matchmaking program, then we are working with them to try to get the projects done. So we're going out and finding, you know, investors. We're going out and finding a policy paths for them to move forward. We're going and finding leads, chasing down leads, really trying to support them any way we can when they come out of the program to get into projects and actually deploy their tech. And you know, the asset owners that we work with love it because they themselves recognize that while they know some stuff and they have subject matter expertise, that they're running utilities, or they're running a port, or they're running a municipal airport, and they don't have staff sitting around that's scanning the horizon for all of the latest, you know, whiz bang stuff. And so having a kind of partner that's sourcing innovation that can connect them with a bunch of companies is valuable to them, and they get to meet with a bunch of smart folks. And so that's kind of the bread and butter of our organization. And I would just point out that, you know, these companies, many of them have folks who are at the helm who have backgrounds, you know, they're PhDs, or they've been researchers through the national lab system, or they've come out of the best universities in the country or in the world in some cases, and they are making great personal and professional sacrifices to run these startups because they're so passionate about whatever their vision is for the future. And I just think that we as a state should honor these startups and see the sacrifice and the passion and the kind of vision that they have, and anything that we can do to show that we as a state want them and want them to grow in our state is helpful. And at the end of the day, that's kind of what we're trying to do here at Launch. So.
Thank you, Isaac. If there's somebody out there in chat or Facebook that is listening now or listens later, how can they best reach you? If they have a startup or they know of someone that has a startup and they want to engage Launch Alaska on your resources, what's the best way to do that?
I mean, if you're a startup, you can just go to the apply page of our website, just launchalaska.com/apply.
Okay.
Or shoot us an email, Isaac at Launch Alaska or info@launchalaska.com. You know, pretty easy to get in touch with us. We also have, you know, Facebook and LinkedIn and a strong social presence. So
beautiful. Let's all circulate more of that. It's so important. You know, we're here today with the Nature Conservancy of Alaska, and we're talking about a research report that came out from the McKinley Research Group with an incredible group of Alaskans today on here. But what Isaac was just talking about is such a critical part of developing this economy. You know, a lot of it does come from innovative startups, and where do people find that support, and how do they find a natural place to look at financial opportunities, funding, all those kinds of things. So it's been beautiful to hear from all of you today. I'm going to go to Brian next, and then after Brian, I'm going to do one last question. I can't believe that we're already an hour into this. It's just amazing. It's been such an exciting time. So after Brian gives his remarks, I'm going to start with him and roll back up with one last question. And on that one, it's going to be on the federal infrastructure package. So maybe if everyone answers in about 4 minutes, we'll be right on time. So without further ado, Brian, your remarks.
Great, thank you. And yes, so greetings from Juneau, Alaska. I'm the director of the Juneau Economic Development Council, and we take a global perspective of these issues, but we also are focused here locally. Many of you have participated in our annual Innovation Summit, and I appreciate that. Every winter we do that. We host that here in Juneau. In 2020, one of the themes that we explored was business in a changing climate. So this is a conversation that is critical, that we continue and appreciate. Every time we talk about this, we all advance our thinking. The cruise ship electrification. I think many of you know that Juneau is the most visited city in Alaska in the summertime, and that's because we have cruise ships. We're not the most visited city last summer or this summer because we haven't had cruise ships, but a lot of people come through here. And Juneau and Alaska, we're super proud that we're the first place anywhere on the planet where you could plug in a cruise ship. So a few years ago, we created a working group here in Juneau focused around renewable energy. And so we asked the question, how can we incorporate more renewable energy into our economy? And I already mentioned the example of the electric vehicles. It all made sense. How come there aren't more? Well, then we decided, we need to put in we need to help people to make that investment. And again, Isaac and others have sort of brought that point. Garrett made that point as well, that we have to, it's great to see the opportunity, but to get us unstuck, there's a role that governments, state, local, federal, tribal, can play that are often critical to unlock progress. We see that also in capital transit. Our community has identified electrification is important. We're the first public transportation agency in Alaska that has electric buses, and it's just begun and it continues to grow. But that's because there's an effort ongoing. Electric tours. So we look at we have Tongass Electric. This is this startup company that is looking at designed, hasn't quite deployed yet, but a fully electric vessel for tours. And they do that for a couple of reasons. They're motivated by the market, right, that wants a greener product as well. They also have cost considerations, potentially. Right now, costs are working against them as any startup. But then also there's positive impacts on the environment. Less noise on an electric motor than a diesel motor for the whale watching experience. We're seeing hybrid fishing vessels. We're not seeing a lot of them, but we're seeing them. They toll out there, they use their diesel engines to get out to the fishing grounds, but then when they're working, going slow, they turn on their electric power, and that turns out to be efficient. But not a lot of people are doing that because there's a cost, there's investment that needs to be made. We've seen in Juneau, we've seen district heating, right? It hasn't actually been deployed, but we have a plan, we have a property, we have investments made, because there's interest in using the energy that we have here, using actually heat pumps from seawater heat pumps to heat the downtown Juneau, taking advantage of the resources that we have. We've seen local nonprofit. We've looked at the building industry, and we've looked at heat pumps. And we've seen a local nonprofit do a private carbon offset, and they've funded over 20 free. They've chosen to, you can come to Juneau, you can buy an offset voluntarily for your carbon, and this nonprofit takes that offset and puts it into a heat pump for a working class family. And so they've done 20 of those at no cost already to the family. And I already mentioned the big project, which is the Sea Alaska, that we can take no credit for that. But that carbon trading is important because, again, like I mentioned earlier, it's changed behavior. It was, we live in the largest national forest. Lots of people would love to see us harvest more timber. We all know how challenging that has been because the federal government controls the access to the forest. But it was very interesting for all of us to see private owners of these trees of timber choose, in their own best interest, in their own, that the environmental stewardship returns on their land was higher or better for them in their analysis than harvesting the trees. So I think those are some powerful mechanisms that there just aren't enough of to drive us forward. We benefit from the innovation of climate change. We see this. The Walsh and I mentioned him earlier at the University of Alaska has come up with a tourism weather index. You can actually see opportunities, if you want to call them that, but there are no increased opportunities where, because of weather changes, what parts of the state have more days of for vacationing, for seasonal tourism, and what parts of the states actually may be losing out. And Garrett's an expert on the seafood industry, but we're big in mariculture in this. We see the huge potential in our region. We sort of see a sad thing happening in the Pacific Northwest south of us, where increased temperature, increased acidification may be moving it towards us. But then we have to stop climate change because it's probably going to move right past us. And there's concerns about that. There's some clever. We have some seaweed producers harvesting in kelp, and we're seeing, again, I'm a little out of my league here because I don't understand all this, but the ecosystem services that these can provide to counter some of the acidification that's occurring because of climate change, that could then allow us to continue to have our shellfish farming and have an additional industry, which we don't have in our region, around harvesting kelp affected by climate change, but having people understand, the scientists understand as well, and then having the interface sufficiently with the business community so that they can then take advantage of these sorts of opportunities. So my remarks are more focused on the local changes. We know that changes would happen more quickly because so many of these changes are happening. Most of these changes are happening because it's in the best interest of the company or the individual to do so. What if society, state, government were to be able to make some additional investments? I think a lot of these changes would be accelerated quickly. So I'll leave it at that. Lisa, thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Brian. I'm going to go ahead and squeeze in closing comments I've been asked to mention, because I think we'll sort of roll out with the final question on the use of the federal infrastructure package. So I just want to remind everyone, we want to say thank you to the Nature Conservancy in Alaska. We're dedicated to their commitment of bringing bipartisan solutions forward to address climate solutions that impact all of us. We're grateful for their commissioning of the McKinley Research Report to look at Alaska's unique opportunities to address climate change and their economic implications of them. We've been excited to read that, and we'll put those in the links. As you want to move forward this summer and continue to look at climate opportunities, please follow the Nature Conservancy Alaska on Facebook and visit the webpage dedicated to this effort. Again, there'll be links there with this report and our conversation here today. Any questions you can put in the chat, and we'll follow back up on questions that arise later. So for my last question, we've spent a lot of appropriate time around the state of Alaska, local communities, the private sector interests, and those challenges. But just as timing would have it, last night, a landmark bipartisan infrastructure package passed the Senate, led by our own very special Senator Lisa Murkowski, who has been a leader in renewable energy and has been a leader in climate, and of course in startup growth and carbon taxes. So as we look to that, in the report itself, it highlights a specific area. I just wanted to remind everyone that investment in renewable energy can help catalyze economic growth in the state of Alaska. We know this, but to see it in the report is beautiful. The report found that from 2010 to 2020, renewable energy projects had spanned the following: $690 million invested in over 260 projects in over 160 Alaskan communities, 448 million pounds of CO2 offset annually, and 50 to 20 construction jobs per million invested. That's exciting. So on the heels of that data and on the vote last night, I'd like to go around, and I'm going to start with Brian and roll back up since we've been starting from the top, and allow each of you to give a few minutes on what you think the best use of the federal infrastructure spending that will be allocated for Alaska would be toward a more sustainable and diverse economy. So starting with you, Brian.
Well, great. And I'll trust my colleagues to catch up the many things that I'm not going to do. So I'll just focus on a few. Maybe I'll just continue with the tourism. We know why people come to Alaska. They don't come to see the oil gushing. They come to see beauty of our place. They want to see this pristine environment. And I think that is an investment in renewable energy that allows them to have that experience in a way that is carbon free, potentially, is really valuable. So I would say amongst those investments that we need to make is in ports. It shouldn't be just that Juneau has the ability to plug in electric, plug in your cruise ship. Let's make that available in all of our ports. We have ferries, and we have a tremendous amount of hydro energy connected to pretty much everywhere the ferries travel to. Let's put some infrastructure in there to get the ferries. Norway does this. Get the ferries to be electric. I mean, I'm sure there's some challenges there, but we've had enough challenges with our ferry system that I'm sure this is just one more challenge to kind of make it go to electric. I think that would be an incredible investment as well. And I know places like Juneau that have hydro capacity could expand that hydro capacity, but the investments are monumental, right? This lake tap hydroelectric projects. Let's continue to provide resources so that us and other places, the more renewable energy we have in these communities that can support renewable energy, the better our programs like power cost equalization can work for those communities that don't have access to those. That's my little plug for the rest of the state on power cost equalization. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
That's great, Brian. Great plugs for power cost equalization and our ferry system and innovation. I really appreciate that. Okay, so Isaac, ideas for use of this unprecedented largesse in federal infrastructure coming to the state of Alaska and to the United States.
Yeah, well, I would be remiss to not, from my friends in the energy community, to not point out that energy efficiency is the best kind of return on investment that we have for those funds. And I also just think in the short term, from a job perspective, it's a great way to get a bunch of people. Anyone who wants a job should get to work retrofitting or both commercial and residential buildings throughout the state, and rail belt, rural. We should just tighten up the envelope of the entire state, and that's something that training programs can be put together really quickly to train a bunch of folks up. Really, anyone who wants to work. If we have any folks out of some of the declining industries in the state that want to get into a different industry, that's a great way to do it. So anyhow, energy efficiency upgrades. Ask me to choose my pet projects in the state.
Yes.
When we had a recent earthquake, I thought about, my first thought was my family, and then the Port of Alaska was my second. I just think the port is critical to the state's lifeblood, and I also think there's an opportunity there. To have the port not just be more secure and resilient, but also to showcase some of the technologies that we're all talking about here today. Electric hustlers and just kind of electrifying all port infrastructure, I think is a really exciting opportunity. I also think there's some really interesting aerospace projects in the state that we should be supporting. That's a real sector bright spot, including some municipal airports. There are many companies who think that the future of aviation is hopping between municipal airports throughout the country, and that there's a real role for municipal airports to play. And then also, I could talk about this forever. So there's a long list of infrastructure things, but a lot of interesting work researched recently on if we want to get our grid to the point where we think it should be in 20 years, the investment in kind of rooftop solar forces other investments in the grid that allow us to get the grid to the point that we want it in the future. Whereas if we just invest in like utility scale solar and wind and storage, that a lot of the kind of poles and wires and boxes and in homes that you need to actually have a smart grid don't necessarily get built. And so from a public investment perspective, I think we should be kind of covering the every rooftop in the state with solar panels, because that will force the upgrades to the rest of the utility infrastructure that we need to allow things like bidirectional charging in the future off electric vehicles, and smart kind of IoT in the home, and all those whiz bang things that we all think is coming. You need upgrades to electric boxes and feeder lines and kind of home management systems for all that stuff to come about. And so anyhow, that would be another major use of those public funds right now.
Interesting, Isaac. Make sure you get your comments to our delegation. I can help you find the best pathway to do that, but I think you just made incredibly insightful recommendations, and I'm just not sure that I am sure that wouldn't be the average email they would get on the subject. So thank you for that. You're thoughtful. Garrett.
Yeah, well, I'm curious mainly what Clay has to say next, so I won't take too much time. Broadband, obviously, this is one of the things that we're optimistic with, and this is why we're actually, we think the timing is excellent. Fiber heading out to the Aleutian chain, low Earth orbit satellites, and all the interface there. Environmental monitoring is a key one for us to know as we think about climate change, knowing what that change is taking place. Monitoring for sea ice conditions is a key one in the seafood world. Ferry electrification. One thing that we like about this is to have the lessons from electrification and hybridization trickle its way down to smaller size vessels. Brian mentioned some projects. We think there's opportunity there. And then seaweed processing. There could be an opportunity if it's feasible that long-term financing for a facility to process seaweed, potentially in Southeast or in South Central. This could be a viable project.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Garrett. Mayor Coughlin.
Well, I haven't talked much about Cordova, so I'm going to weave it into the story here. And Garrett, just to answer your question up front, and thank you for yielding the time. Abe Lincoln said, if I had 8 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend 7 of it sharpening my steel chainsaw. So if I had $8 to spend on Alaskan infrastructure, courtesy federal government, I would spend 7 of it on the blue economy. And I'll just say why right now. Because we are still a resource extraction state to some extent. There's a lot of headwinds against mineral development, despite their critical need in our country and frankly for the energy transition. A lot of headwinds against timber harvesting. We still have seafood harvesting. Even tourism took a huge hit. But seafood is a renewable energy on an annual cycle, and we need to do better as a state with the data. We aren't getting all the data we need, and we aren't using it as well as we can. We're getting the real data long after the management happens. We need a more agile in-season management. And I spend a lot of all my time as mayor actually in the fisheries side. I don't go to Alaska Municipal League and stuff like that. I go to the Board of Fish meetings and follow policy because it's our community's economy. But Alaska has unbelievable underutilized capacity. The only thing standing between Cordova and a top 5 US seafood port is that we don't process in the winter. And we have the resource, but we've got $1 billion of infrastructure that has a 3-month season. So what's leveraged Airbnb and Uber again is underutilized capacity. It's our biggest opportunity, and we have lots of it. And our biggest resource in Alaska is Alaskans. Keep circling back to we can solve this. So I had an amazing opportunity to go testify in 2017 in front of the US Senate Natural Resources Committee on infrastructure because Trump was getting ready to do it then. So I'm going to repeat it in a Cliff Note version right now. If you make the right investments in infrastructure, you can have the good social outcomes. And so that in my book should be the goal. How can we improve the quality of life for all that live on the planet? So in Cordova, we had, and Liesl, thank you for your role in this. We got investments, state investments and federal investments in our Power Creek hydroelectric project and our Humpback Creek hydroelectric project. We went from a $50 million a year seafood port to $100 million a year seafood port. We paid back all that money in taxes and economy to the state and the federal government. They got their return on investment, but our city got another $600,000 to $700,000 a year in raw fish tax revenues, and that had social implications. and we increase the value of our seafood. So there's so many amazing Cordova stories. Rachel Calander is an amazing Cordova story, but we have,
Yes.
I could share dozens. But we had the safest community in the state, the third best community for young families to live in. We have come to Cordova and see the amazing infrastructure. We're hosting the Electrify Alaska conference. Brian at Juneau, I want all the Southeast communities especially to share all their success stories and the things that great things that you're doing down there so that South Central Alaska can move in that direction. But I want the state to have some skin in this game. I want us to match that infrastructure package, send the right signal that we know where the good investments are in our state. We're going to make those. So fisheries. The United States imports 94% of our seafood by dollar value. Most of that's farmed under conditions that we wouldn't allow in our own country. It's in our top 5 trade imbalances. This is big stuff for the country. And Alaska doesn't just support food for our country. It's protein. It's what we need for nutrition. It's very important. And we have a lot of underutilized and unutilized fisheries out there. And again, our hatchery system here in Prince William Sound, it can be partially repurposed towards aquaculture, mariculture. We've got some technology problems we can solve. The oyster farmers can't produce at scale because of all the manual handling of it. We can unlock that, Isaac, if we can work with you and others to break the labor barrier, then we can farm at scale. Our 76 shellfish farms produce $1 million. So we need to channel that infrastructure. And for the marine highway system, for heaven's sakes, we're having a hard time struggling to where the puck has been there. Can we please start skating? Can we lead in ocean, in maritime, in ways like with Aaron Juneau with their electric boats? He's going to come and speak at our conference, by the way. And can we start crafting a fair marine highway system of the future and kind of start pointing to where the puck should be? Washington State Ferries is going there. Let's rip a page out of their book, but let's think even bigger. I've lost too many friends to air aviation travel in Alaska. Why can't we look at something like airships, small landing pads, small infrastructure build? It's a slower, safer transport. Why aren't we looking at an alternative or a hybrid that we can start using hydrogen powered airships to move from community to community Alaska safely, medevac people? You've got hydrogen on board as a water, a heat, and a propulsion source, and buoyancy for the. So let's do some cool stuff in aerospace too. And so infrastructure, we need to invest in our waterfront infrastructure, from the Port of Anchorage to our fishing ports to our potential for export and so forth. So I would say let's spend it on blue economy.
Thank you, Clay. You're amazing. We're going to close out with Ben. Before we do, just a couple thank yous. First, to every panelist here today: Ben Kelly, Mayor Clay Copeland, Garrett Everidge, Isaac Vandenberg, Brian Holst. Thank you so much. Thank you to Rachel Calander and to Jackson Blackwell of Calander and Associates. Their amazing work they're doing on behalf of the Nature Conservancy. Please go to nature.org/AK Climate Opportunity, nature.org/AK Climate Opportunity, or follow the Nature Conservancy Alaska on their Facebook page. Ben, you have the final word.
Great. It was going to be a short one because my 8-week-old son just woke up from his nap. I would say,
He has the final word.
I'm on daddy duty. So that's what I would say. I would say the biggest thing that we missed out on that Isaac briefly touched on would just be investing in our launch pad on Kodiak, Alaska. It's a humongous untapped opportunity. We do a lot of work down there. We're seeing a lot of people from all over the world show interest. And I would love to see some love down there. It receives no state funding, has been running on federal and commercial revenues for the last 5 or 6 years. So a lot of people see it as a boondoggle, but it's a growing asset for our state. And I think something that's really underutilized. So I'll leave it there. Everybody else, thanks for your time and your thoughts. I think a lot of good conversation. Thanks, Liesl, for moderating.
Couldn't agree with you more, Ben, and love to your son. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I look forward to talking to you guys again. Take care.